Hi, I'm just going to be picking up right where I left off, the last video. Okay. And again, first of all, just let me say thank you for joining me today. I hope you're all having a great day. Okay, here I go. She suddenly had a pen from thin air, but most likely from her purse, while my eyes were on the gun. She wrote something down on the back of a receipt and gave it to me. If you want to call him, call him. If a girl answers, it's just Rio. Tell her to put Sully on, and don't let her give you no bleep. Tell her I'm dying and you gotta talk to... She was twirling her fingers around expectantly, meanwhile digging through her purse for some odder end. Sully. Yeah, right, she said. You got any eye drops? She stood up and started looking in the medicine cabinet. Her beautiful fur collar had slid into the bathtub, sponging up slightly stagnant water that couldn't make it to the drain. I went to the phone and did like I was told. Returning to the place I had left her, I found she had vanished with all her things like I had dreamed it all up when I accidentally drink too much NyQuil when I'm sick and dream things I know happen but no one else does. The house was empty. Outside, the party was bumping. Beer cans were stacked taller than me. Firecrackers shot up and screamed like a human who had his butt lit on fire. I'm editing as I go. There was our woman, a beer can in each bird bone hand, wearing a Carhartt I had not seen in quite a while. Yeah. More of our party passed until headlights came streaming up the gravel lane. Cops, someone said. Cops! People were screaming everywhere. And in the ensuing panic, someone tried to hide all the beer cans, but only got as far as knocking the whole mountain of them over and then running back into the house. The lady set her twin drinks down, making sure they did not tilt over on the uneven earth. She swaggered and lollygagged all the way back to her fractured vehicle, got in the driver's seat as if fixing to leave our party. The headlights came closer until we saw they were attached to a red sports car. A man was driving, transvestite in the passenger seat, a beautiful one. The driver got out. He had to be just about the meanest looking person I'd ever hoped to lay eyes on. Just the stuff nightmares are made of. His eyebrows looked like wire bristles ready to scrub that smile right off our faces. One eye bulged. He had a blistering, weeping herpes outbreak on his upper lip and broken blood vessels all on his cheeks. He eyeballed us. What happened to my car? I don't know, it just happened, I said. It was only a little accident. I made the mistake I see now of calling it little. He picked up the two beer cans and flung them at the wreckage. As if in response, it fired up. By some miracle, it reversed about 25 feet. She's in there? You let her get back in it? Someone in the crowd, a man, yelled. The car suddenly lurched forward with the furred and bejeweled lady screaming like a bandit. Yee-haw! The car smashed into that same pole once again. Smoke poured from every crevice of the once magnificent machine. The smell of burning artifice was in the air. Jean and I, her husband, and even the transvestite came jogging to the car, trying to pry open the door that would let her free. Smoke was blowing in all our faces. We couldn't see her, even though she was no more than a foot from us. Inch by inch, the smoke thinned after we had given up on the handle, and Rio had bounced to her car for a crowbar or some such. It cleared, and then it all became clear. The pistol was poking through the smoke before we even saw her face. But after a few seconds, we saw that too. Remarkably unscathed, and her eyes shooting daggers at the husband. The gun was aimed right at his chest. Jean and I put our arms up and took 2 steps back, each saying childish things like, "Whoa," and "Hold on now," and "Oh goodness." "If you think I'm afraid to take you straight to hell with this gun, you are wrong," the remarkably unscathed lady said. Rio bounced on back. "What in the Sam Hill is going on here?" "You two. Now you just stand in front of him, see if I can get a 2-for-1 special on this first bullet." Jean and I kept slowly backing away towards the beer. "Come on now, don't do this. What are you thinking? Come home now, get in the car," Rio said. "I mean that car." And she pointed to the one she came in. Or I'll just do it myself. Or hold on, she says, "Or I'll just do myself in. How do you like that?" She turned the gun to herself. I looked at Jean now that we were close to the house. There was nothing to say, though, except to turn and go inside to call the police, which would be the first time we would have ever done that. And we had once seen a man get mauled by a surprised bobcat, and I even saw someone's lips turn blue from too much nerve pills and whiskey, but we just settle it ourselves unless the person in trouble really looks us in the eyes and says cops. On the porch, I turned to look one last time, and I could have been knocked over with a feather. The 3 of them stood, locked in a group hug, gun nowhere in sight. "I think we settled it. Thanks for everything," the gun lady said to us as she climbed into the back of the unwrecked car. Jean took my hand, said maybe we should go somewhere else, but he didn't move. And I stood wondering when I would ever be able to see through him, and when I would know the right thing to say. I tugged a little to tell him that I did want to go somewhere with him. He went in to get his big coat for me. Fielder, Gabriel, Uriel, and Everett all came out, too, wearing their "I'm gonna be cold a while" coats. We took off walking together, minutes after midnight. Behind me, a joint was being passed. I could smell it. I could tell by the laughter, the need for a bobby pin, but we kept on, probably not one of us knowing where we were going. The gravel road ended about a mile out from Jean's house. We picked to go left, all of us hesitating until our bodies just sort of veered that way. The stars were bulging, peppered from one coast of the horizon to the other. We were in the dome of stars in a pitch-black night, somehow blacker in my memory than it really was because of the bone-bitingly cold night it was. I had my hand stuffed in Jean's coat pocket alongside his. The first structure we came across we went into. It was St. Peter's Episcopal Church right there on the cusp of Plain Cap's cluster of life. Most people and businesses was right there in that little bubble. The Episcopalian population wasn't high by anything except default. My own father was a churchgoer on the one day a year he found himself in church, Easter. Inside, the shadows made it eerie. A little creak would happen. The building would be settling, and Fielder would shoot his eyes over his shoulder. He would look so hard into the shadow to make sure nothing was moving inside it. I expected his eyes to pop clean out of his head. I could sense we should not be here without some vested authority like a priest or maybe God himself to stand over us in the pulpit and guard us. We were wobbly and beery, and at least 2 of us reeked of weed. Still, we ended up in the basement looking around. Still, when we ended up in the basement looking around, I forgot all my scaredy cat stuff and went in my own direction to poke around the piles of odd trinkets and boxes. It was pitch dark minus the 2 overhead light bulbs Gabriel had located. I turned the corner and saw Fielder looking suspiciously at some object the shadows had in their grips. It was big, almost as tall as me. My hand reached out to it, felt through parts of it, small metal bars. It was a cage. Jean found us and tried looking inside, but he couldn't see. No noise was coming from it, so we could have just as easily turned away and went home and just lived our lives the same way till we expired. The truth is, though, that it didn't happen that way. Uriel came barging up with a white candle lit and leading the way to all the dark places she wanted to look at. By now, all 6 of us were standing in front of this cage, gawking into the blackness. She split our group and came front and center, lighting the interior and making us all breathless with what we laid eyes on. With its nose pressed right up to the bars was the most massively boned yet emaciated bobcat I have ever seen. It looked at me, and I went towards it to set it free. Uriel, screaming, "What are you doing?" ripped my hand back. The animal was unfazed. His face was still to the cage, eyes cast downward. I unclasped the door and opened it a little. No one moved. The animal stepped each paw out one by one and came to me. Uriel whispered, "He's gonna bite you, Hazel." Shaking from expectation, I held my hand out. His nose came close. He touched his muzzle to me momentarily. Then he bounded out the church, back to the wild, back to Alaska. A mushroom cloud came over us. Color flooded our eyes. Uriel and Everett, not experiencing the cloud, wondered why our eyes had rolled back into our head, and they were leaking like mops being wrung out. I could see that my coat was a new color that burned my retinas. I would have thought I was dying if I somehow knew in the pit of my intestines that I wasn't. Gabriel was blindly swinging his hands in search of some comfort. I gave him my hand. I took hold of Jean's hand, who locked in with Fielder's. Gabriel, blinded by the tears, swung his free hand around. Fielder took hold like a brother, holding on for dear life. We stood, crying and clinging and wondering what it was that had hit us. Even the palest tangerine was brighter than the sun to me. Even buttercup blue was saturated in technicolor. Then the rainbows around us swirled all at once, all together. I closed my eyes, believing my brain would start melting and pouring out of my ear canals. And that just wouldn't be ladylike. Okay. Now the story goes to Fielder's point of view. And so I'll read a little bit from his chapter. So this chapter is Fielder speaking. He says, "I opened my eyes. The hands that were joined in mine just a moment before were gone. I found myself standing in a field of low-lying soybeans. It was night still, and not one sound was in the air except when the breeze would come and ruffle the leaves on the soy plants. The only light burning was through twin windows a little ways off. I could feel the cold blowing, but somehow it wasn't biting me. It didn't feel like Plain Cap. It didn't feel like New Year's Eve anymore. There wasn't even a dust of snow on these green leaves. I looked and looked around me, waiting for Hazel and Jean and Gabriel to rise up from low-lying hiding spots. They never came for me. So I picked up my feet and went to the lights in the distance. The only thing in this world keeping me company was the sound of my own legs treading earth and leaves. The lights were coming from a little lonely house on the plain, shuttered in mint green and with peeling slapboards to cover its skeleton. The smell of corn and animals was about me, the little bits of dust from them streaming into my lungs and leaving the soft innards of my mouth feeling gritty. I got closer and could see a man standing on the front porch, looking like an angry father waiting for me to come home. The porch light was making an echoing glow around his tall, lean frame. When I was a few paces out, he clomped down the twin steps and disappeared into the darkness around the house. "Hey," I called out, but there was nothing in return. I ducked my head around the corner, but saw a pit of blackness with no limits. The sun had set. There was no answer when I knocked on the front door. It was a solid oak panel with a brassy doorknob. It popped open when I drew my hand back from the knocking. Not being brought up to believe it was polite to come in unannounced to a stranger's home, I peeked my head in. The room was filled around its edges with small candles, big candles, candlesticks, candles and candelabras, matte maroon ones with wax spilling over their tabletops and hardening into colored icicles off the edge. Close to death, saved by death. Hello? I called into the house. I was both hoping and not hoping there would be an answer. I was both ravenous for another voice and terrified of who it would belong to. There was no answer, sans every single flame in the room turning an eggplant and violent red color for the briefest of seconds, all in unison. Is anyone home? I stuttered here, not knowing how to put to words to what it was I was needing. I think I need some help. The flames died, all of them. The night was there around me, quiet and still. The moon poured its silver blanket on me. It was watching me, the way my palms got coated with nervous perspiration and gripped the door. I was unable to move. My body was paralyzed, and I was sure that the man who was near could see me too. The flames came to life an eternity later in a way that stopped my heart and stole my breath. Each candle was now on the ceiling, burning downward. The door frame leading to a kitchen was barely visible, but half the man was illuminated, coldly observing me and the battle raging inside myself. My face was damp, my throat was tighter than a 10-cent spring. Half of his face was showing, the other half hidden by the door frame. His head was balding, and his face was lined deeply, especially with the shadows of the night being cut into its surface. His eyes were little knots of blue yarn, and it looked like he had lived a hard road just by seeing his beat-up, gnarly exterior, and the way ashy grayness seemed to lay on top of him. Hello? Can you help me? I managed to whisper. I could barely hear myself. He set his eyes on me and blinked once. We stood there staring, two men who couldn't talk and didn't know how. He shook his head once slowly. Get in the house, boy, the walls said, or something said, but it surely wasn't him. The tight-lit face let not one syllable escape. Scared as I was, paralyzed like I was, my legs found themselves moving into the upside-down candle house. A cry came from somewhere nearby, but my eyes couldn't find it. The man looked to it, somewhere in the corner, but hidden. He crouched and held out a leathery limb, palm up. I saw that the knee of his trousers was torn out and replaced with a cotton patch. It wasn't sewn from the inside. It was a bunched-up mess from the outside by someone without enough sense to turn them inside out. A man. He looked at the crying noise, patiently holding out his hand to it as a peace offering. I could see the candle's light glimmering on the rim of his eyes, where a line of tears had appeared. Okay, I'll stop there. And I will pick up next time. And I'll read what the crying noise was. So please stay tuned. And have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye.